In the state of Wisconsin lies a 900-acre plot of land that, through a string of bad luck or possibly some unknown force, has led to a series of unnatural occurrences for those who wish to edit the untamed nature of the land. This is the twisted history of Rainbow Springs. The year is 1960. A man named Francis Schrodel decides it's time to take his string of fortune to the next level and purchases the now known Rainbow Springs plot of land. Prior to this, Mr. Schrodel had founded the Schrodel Construction Company in Milwaukee in the late 1950s. After a number of successful projects, it was estimated that Schrodel was worth somewhere between $20 to $40 million. This led Schrodel to take the next step in his entrepreneurial ambitions. He purchased the Rainbow Springs plot of land in Mukwonago, Wisconsin, after falling in love with the natural beauty. Not to mention the population of Mukwonago had begun to see a boom in residents in the 1950s, as the population doubled in less than 10 years. Francis Schrodel was described as a cocky guy, but with dreams and ideas far ahead of his time. A friend of Schrodel's described him as a gutsy individual who had the tenacity to follow his dreams. The Rainbow Springs plot sat south of the pristine Mukwonago River, also known as the cleanest river in all of Wisconsin. Originally untouched to human hands, it was home to several endangered species, including the endangered rainbow shell or Velosa iris, and an incredibly geologically restricted freshwater mussel. As Francis Schrodel started construction on the untouched land, his dream of Rainbow Springs came closer, a dream that would ultimately become his downfall. Through Schrodel's hard work, the Rainbow Springs Country Club opened in 1959, and hosted the local focal point of the entire project, a grand opening gala and New Year's Eve party. Both of those were reportedly very successful. According to those who attended the gala dinner, extremely expensive utensils and tableware were used. This was likely to excite those for what was to come in Schrodel's project. In the following years, the country club saw a boom in popularity. Seizing the opportunity, Schrodel began the construction of an 18-hole golf course, a second recreational lodge, Carnival Street, a 90,000 square foot convention center, 750-room hotel, a private airplane strip, and a ski hill, all of which were supposedly inspired by the architecture work of Frank Lloyd Wright, who was famous for creating Falling Water, a well-known building which is described as the epitome of organic architecture. It was also rumored that he had worked on the Rainbow Springs project himself, though not confirmed. Everything seemed fine and promising until funds began to dry up. Despite Schrodel's successful construction company and funding, it wasn't enough to fuel the ambition of the project. In 1965, those close to Schrodel attempted to convince him to open the areas of the property that were finished and forget about the idea of one big grand opening for all the new projects. According to a friend close to Schrodel, he wanted a big grand opening of the complex like Wisconsin had never seen. He said Frank Sinatra would perform at the opening. It was said that Schrodel also denied any help from possible financial partners. Not to mention at the same time, 27 miles south of Mukwonago, the Lake Geneva Playboy Club, owned by Hugh Hefner, was to open in less than 3 years. This newer club was likely to take a large dent out of the Rainbow Springs prospect. This was Schrodel's project. He wanted to take all the success and share none of it. The coming years were nasty for the Schrodel family fortune. In the early 1970s, Schrodel's construction company was plagued by lawsuits. The funds for Rainbow Springs were out, and along with it went all of Schrodel's dreams that the Springs would see a grand opening. All the while, the Lake Geneva Playboy Club was experiencing great success. From 1971 to 1973, Schrodel was in a tough battle to secure enough money to finish the Rainbow Springs resort. He attempted to secure a $15 million loan from the Chicago bank and was denied. This led to big trouble for the Schrodel family, as Francis was unable to pay the mortgages to the Marshall and Isley Bank, which had funded a large amount of the project in the recent years. Just like that, everything, including the property and the items on it, were now property of the Marshall and Isley Bank. According to inside sources, Schrodel was last seen on the property in 1974, as Mukwonago sheriffs were sent by the bank to evict Schrodel and his wife. It's reported that the last thing Schrodel said as he was being evicted was, If I can't open it, no one will. So after Schrodel's eviction, the idea of Rainbow Springs hung in limbo for quite some time. No one quite knew what was going to happen to the unfinished project. Schrodel sadly passed away 2 years after his eviction in 1976. The M&I Bank held onto the property for over 10 years. From what we know, they met with many potential buyers, but for some reason a sale never took place. This was until 1985, 11 years after the M&I Bank claimed the land from Schrodel, when two partner companies from Las Vegas purchased the land. Things were starting to look hopeful for the dream of Rainbow Springs. This was until the partner company failed to finish the resort and build a health spa due to financial troubles. The partner company searched for buyers but found none. In 1990, one of the partner companies filed for bankruptcy, and the U.S. bankruptcy court gave him 3 years to sell the property. Eventually, they were able to sell it to the Ocala Golf Course out of Florida for $4.2 million. And while this may sound like a significant amount of cash, the truth is the property at this time was worth an estimated $30 million. In 1996, due to splits in the company, the Ocala Golf Course was rebranded back to Rainbow Springs Golf Company. During their time in the 90s, no improvements or renovations were ever made, simply maintenance and management of the already existing areas. Rainbow Springs continued to suffer due to financial issues, and between the times of 2000 and 2002, there were 2 foreclosure attempts due to failure to pay bills on time. During this time, Rainbow Springs became a focal point of the town every year around Halloween. Word began to spread about the abandoned resort, and the idea that it may be haunted embedded itself into the fundamental idea of the resort. The Rainbow Springs Hotel was a highlight of the haunted mysticism. While some buildings, like the country club, were still in use for day-to-day golfing operations, the hotel had sat unused for 35 years. No one was allowed to stay in it due to financial barriers, and while it wasn't abandoned as maintenance did perform upkeep, it was empty for a large part of its time. From 1985 to 2002, the Rainbow Springs Hotel was used as a haunted house for those who wanted to explore one of the supposedly haunted attractions of Mukwonago. From what I've read, a lot of the folklore surrounded Schrodel as being an antagonistic force on the property, causing the financial troubles and cursing Rainbow Springs as he was unable to open it. According to some of the online forums I've read, this haunted conspiracy does have some validity behind it. According to Mike Sasso, a close friend of Schrodel, quote, "But he put a curse on it. His words were, if I can't open it, no one will." The haunted hotel kept Rainbow Springs' relevance in a time where it was clinging on by a thread. This was until 2002, when the newfound hope for Rainbow Springs would unfortunately come crashing down.
A huge, empty, financially troubled resort in Mukwonago went up in flames overnight. About 200 firefighters from 17 departments responded to the fire. The resort was built back in the 1960s, but has been vacant for most of its history.
On the night of April 17, 2002, a massive fire engulfed the 600,000 square foot hotel on the property. Firefighters were called onto the scene by fire alarm detectors within the building. The fire destroyed a quarter of the building. Luckily, no one was injured during the fire, but no cause was ever determined. Groundskeeper Ken Hansen was quoted saying this after the fire: "It's bad. This is a landmark around here. You know it's never going to be rebuilt." At this point, it was quite common for locals of Mukwonago to address rumors of the property being cursed by the spirit of Francis Schrodel. Schrodel's friends had told several news reporters about his final words on the property, but it wasn't just these words that creeped people out. It was a 600,000 square foot hotel on the property that sat abandoned for over 30 years. This, of course, brought a new type of attraction to the property in the form of abandoned exploration and haunted mysticism. I'm not here to give my 2 cents on whether or not it was haunted, but I will provide some stories and tales I've read online. One Reddit user claims that in 2001, a DJ from the city of Milwaukee attempted to spend the night in the abandoned hotel and broadcast his experience live over the radio. According to the user, the plan was originally to set up his equipment on the 3rd floor of the building, but apparently none of his equipment would function up there. So instead he opted for the 1st floor. The user goes on to say that for the first few hours, nothing out of the ordinary happened within the hotel, but at 3 a.m., a loud banging noise began to emit and the DJ audibly became panicked. The DJ described the sounds as, quote, running upstairs, banging around and making all types of noise. The DJ went on to say, quote, "It's like I can see shadows moving. It's kind of hard to tell if it's coming away or getting closer." The DJ then erupted into a panic and began to scream into the microphone that he was going to leave and get his equipment in the morning. The user goes on to say that for the next few minutes, there was silence. The sound of bare feet coming down a flight of stairs began to sound, followed by a series of clicks, and the broadcast stopped. Now, it's very likely that this could have been an elaborate prank to pull on the listeners, or just the DJ's delusional visions, but the story is interesting given the circumstances of the property. Another story following a similar theme comes from a blog post about their experiences exploring the hotel. The story starts off normal as the user describes the time him and his friends traveled to the location after hearing about it from someone at their local high school. Rainbow Springs has a long driveway that travels through about half a mile of woods. The user explains that along the way to the location, they heard a sound in the forest that can only be described as, quote, the sound of a wolf being killed in the forest. As the user entered the building, they described it as being similar to the hotel in The Shining, and couldn't get the thought out of their head. They also described the rooms as strangely plain and uninteresting, likely one of the reasons it never opened. The user leaves us with the comment that the whole time they were there, they felt as if they were being watched in the building, and everything felt unnaturally cold inside. So what happened to Rainbow Springs? The fate of the golf course and resort has been held in limbo for quite some time, and with the added weight of a fire burning down the most prominent building on the property, things were looking dark. Well, the golf course and clubhouse continued to operate until 2008, when the state of Wisconsin purchased the land and opened it for recreational hunting, hiking, swimming, and fishing use. Despite the efforts of several politicians over the recent years to reopen the golf course and turn it back into private land, nothing has ever come to fruition. From what I've found online, many conservationists believe this is a good thing, given the fact that the springs is attached to the Mukwonago River, the cleanest river in all of Wisconsin, as I mentioned earlier, and the thought of the golf course reopening could endanger that. It's almost poetic to look at the history of this place. While some believe that things fell apart due to a curse beset in the place from a failed founder or some other ghostly force, the beginning all started with untamed nature, and as time went on, nature reclaimed what was originally theirs. I believe that Rainbow Springs remains a character study of the dangers that pride can have on one's dream. Who knows? If things were different and Schrodel had looked upon his dream in a more logical mind and accepted the help and advice of those close to him, it's possible that this place could still be operating today. But as it stands, nature and all of its chaos had a different plan. Now people can come and enjoy this location for free, and I think that's a great thing. The land has reverted back to its natural state of wetland, with a slight mix and hint of the resort at its foundation. With the last building being destroyed about 5 years ago, there's no denying that the dream of Rainbow Springs Resort is over, but the mysticism and history will live on for years. Thanks for listening. This is Brucey of the Sea, and I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.